It's Mozz, it's Chaz, and we're talking about Jessica Jones. Hey, cats and kittens, welcome to the AKA JonesCast. I'm Charlie, the Professor Esser, and with me as always is my skinny rich friend.
It's Mozz.
Hey, Mozz, so glad to have you for tonight's episode 8, Season 1 of Jessica Jones, AKA WWJD. What would Jessica do? Jessica experiences a strange homecoming courtesy of Kilgrave. Hogarth's conflict with her estranged wife reaches a tipping point. Directed by Simon Kellen Jones once again, and of course written by Jenna Reback and Scott Reynolds. And of course created by Melissa Rosenberg. Okay. Now, when last we left Jessica, she had come to her childhood home, which we found out that Kilgrave has reconstructed in insane detail, and it's a pretty rough story from there, you know? What do you think, Mozz?
I really, really enjoyed this episode because you really get a deep dive into what makes Kilgrave, what got him there, and what his motivations are. And you almost start to a little bit identify with some of the things he's talking about. You kind of see his humanity a little bit in its warped, twisted form.
Oh, yeah.
But you still get a sense of where, like if you reduce somebody to a child and see what made them that way, you really get a sense of that here. And, you know, where his hurt is and where his actions come from.
Oh, yeah. I mean, without a doubt, David Tennant and Kilgrave really, really are what make Jessica Jones such a powerful show. And It's not to take away from any of our other actors or any of the other character plot lines, but, you know, you get this charismatic villain who convinces you to feel sorry for him, which, not for nothing, is a classic sociopathic trait. You know, a good sociopath is really good at manipulating you into thinking, hey, you know, don't feel bad, I'm your friend, or I'm a victim too, you know, and, you know, right now, I do read comic books a lot, and there's this entire thing about Hydra Cap, which is that, you know, basically through manipulations by Cosmic Cube, Captain America has now become a Hydra agent, you know.
Right.
And he has always been a Hydra agent, and now he's, you know, out there putting forth his conspiracy to bring America under the fascist rule of Hydra.
Wait. So according to the comic, he was always a Hydra agent? I thought he got turned.
Well, no, what happened is that, okay, so in the comic books, they have these things called cosmic cubes, which are basically, and actually, and they do gain sentience, which is that they are, I mean, they don't really go into a lot of detail on this, but the basic idea is that outside of the universe, there is this thing called the Beyond. And the Beyond is self-aware.
Ooh.
And every so often, the Beyond comes into this universe in the form of a cosmic cube. And it starts out as just this thing of limitless energy, essentially a little box in which, a wishing box. But every so often, because the box is around sentiences, it becomes sentient. And then once it becomes a living thing, then suddenly it has its own self-direction. It can still be manipulated, and right now the cosmic cube in question is Kobik, who has taken the form of like a 7-year-old child, and has been manipulated by the Red Skull. But the thing is that when it changes things, it rewrites all of history, or at least it can.
Oh.
It can do a point in time change, but it can also change things throughout history. So now, yeah.
Is it sort of like, you know, in the multiverse theory, the many bubbles kind of thing? Is it just perceiving a different timeline because it changed one little thing and they branch off into multiple, like in, you know.
I mean, yeah, I mean, that is essentially what you're looking at. I mean, honestly, I had an entirely other theory, which is that there was a universe where there was this Hydra Cap and he just got brought into this universe. Because we had seen these universes where Hydra had essentially ruled the world all along. And you know, during the Secret Wars storyline, you know, in an infinite universe, yeah, you're going to have infinite possibilities. And exactly what they create is always a question. Is it simply altered memories, or did they actually alter reality in this way? And what they seem to be implying is they've altered reality in this way. But what my actual point of it is that as I'm reading this Nick Spencer story, how much as a fan of Captain America you want to root for Cap, even as he's being actively Hydra, even as he's being actively fascistic. You say, well, maybe he still has this sense of goodness because he still talks like Captain. He's still talking about you know the betterment of all humanity. But he's talking about the betterment of all humanity through fascism. And it is so easy to get pulled into that madness when you have a charismatic character like a Steve Rogers, you know, or like a David Tennant here, making you feel, oh, well, maybe we're not quite there yet. And he makes this point, Kilgrave makes this point in this episode, where he's trying to explain to Jessica how hard it is for him because he never knows what people do of their own will and what they do because he tells them to. Now, obviously, yeah.
That was an interesting revelation.
Well, you know, it's an interesting revelation until you realize that, well, yeah, but if you're telling someone to do something, you know they're doing it because you told them to, not because they want to. You know what I mean? It's right. Like it's interesting it's interesting on the surface, but you can unpack it fairly quickly to realize you're not telling the whole thing. But he does give this great story about him telling a guy to once go fuck himself. Oh, sorry. Oh goodness. Okay, to go frig himself. We are officially a family podcast, so I have to remind Rob, when we get to 8 minutes and 24 seconds in, that an F-bomb was accidentally dropped in quotation of the episode. But he tells them to go deal with himself in that way, in a sexual way. What was
interesting is it leaves the door open for somebody to pretend to be under his spell, and he really has no way to know, right?
Well, yeah. you no spoilers, but yeah, I think that might come back later. You know, there's this story arc really gets exciting, and this is, I think, very much a strong turning point for this episode or this series. And we are at the halfway point. This is really where you're going to get this acceleration and this turning and this excitement. And we do see that basically, Jessica has agreed to go in there, and we see, but Kilgrave is saying, I'm doing this all on the up and up. I'm paying everyone well. And he calls out the maid and the cook, you know?
Yeah.
And but this, I think, is this interesting point. He makes this point, he tells them to do something, to say, you know, that they are very happy and all these things, but at the same time, you can also tell that he is controlling him when he says that, because, of course, the chef says he is being paid twice what he was at his last job, which he was fired for his drinking problem. You know, which is like not something he needed to volunteer, but he felt obligated to. He felt pushed to. Right. You know, and of course, we do see later that the cook and the maid are in fact Kilgrave's insurance policies, which is that. Oh yeah, and you get to this cold sociopathism of Kilgrave here,
right?
Which is this idea that, you know, he is a sociopath, he is a killer, he is a murderer. He really
Right.
does. Yeah, he does not have that emotional center that you
Right,
need to do good.
Yeah, because even when she takes him on their little excursion and he does a good deed, his only the thing that he got out of it that was worthwhile to him was the adoration, not necessarily the fact that he did something good for somebody else, but somebody looked at him in a position of power. And I think that's really what excited him about it, because immediately after that, when she leaves, he has the maid and the chef do, horrible things.
Oh yeah, and for what it's worth, I mean, this is something that we see again in the comic. Right now in the comics there is what's called the infamous Iron Man, which is this idea that Doctor Doom has taken on the mantle of Iron Man. And prior to this, we also had the superior Spider-Man, which was Dr. Octopus becoming Spider-Man. And in both cases, what you had were these guys who are, still supervillain sociopath criminals, but who have decided that they're going to take on that superheroic mantle, and not understanding that what makes you a superhero isn't just that you do good, it's that you do good for the right reasons.
Right.
And to that extent, we get, and it is it's very interesting what we get here. And before we get too far along, let's get to some of the other details here. One of which is that, so Jessica has barricaded herself in her room, and then Simpson breaks in. Well, actually, no, wait, no, she's coming back up to the room, and then Simpson jumps her, and she's like, oh, actually, and even before that, she talks to Trish about Kilgrave, and she basically insults Kilgrave over the phone. And you see Kilgrave get all, oh, how dare you say that? And then she says, now you know I'm not under his control, because Kilgrave would never let me say that. He's like, oh, okay. But again, it's that very interesting thing about him not, he wouldn't have let that slight go, except, okay, I see how it builds to a better point for me. It's like...
And it's how much of a child he is. And I think you brought it up in an earlier episode. There was that old episode of The Twilight Zone where the child has suggestive powers, or not suggestive, he has the power to, I guess, make anything happen, and how the whole town works around him and they're afraid of him, and he has no semblance of what's right or wrong or any moral compass whatsoever, because when you never had to deal with consequences, how could you?
Well,
and same thing here, he's still a child.
Well, yeah, he is very much still a child. He is, and I think that's one of the things we touched. We get his real origin. Well, we don't get his full origin here, but we get the good point, which is that his parents were experimenting on him, and we don't get exactly why they were experimenting on him yet. But we do see Reva's flash drive come back, and he shows Jessica what he was put through as a child. Yeah. And these, spinal taps and painful experiments, and then...
go ahead, sorry.
And then one day, it all works more powerfully than anyone imagined, and he tells his parents to stop, and you hear his parents say, why are we stepping back, And it is this point of interest here that as a teenage boy he got limitless power.
Right.
And I used to be a teenage boy. And let me tell you, if someone had given me mind control powers, I cannot say as a grown man today that if I would had mind control powers as a young boy at Kilgrave's age, and not for nothing, I had a much nicer childhood growing up than Kilgrave did, that I might not have become as much a monster as Kilgrave. I think most people might have found themselves too easily pulled down to go to the It's a Good Life episode of the Twilight Zone, the Billy Mooney path, we'll say, because of course that's the idea that if you have this infinite power and no one can tell you no,
what motivation is there for you to not do everything you want? At that point, does sort of, is morality only here simply because we have to navigate the world with things that we can't do?
John, in the room.
Like, if we all had the capacity to just do and get whatever we want, would there still be our same sense of morality?
Well, exactly. Well, and we see, and here's like the redemptive argument you can make is, even when I would think about things of that nature, because of course, and not for nothing, I'm a young man reading these comic books as a kid. I'm reading about the Purple Man. I'm reading about Professor Xavier. And as much as I wanted to have Cyclops' eye blasts, show them all, I would then start to think about how that would affect people, and I would feel guilty over that power fantasy. Right. And I'd like to think that as a human being, I would still have that moral compass, because I do have this empathy for other human beings. And I would know that even though I could control minds, I shouldn't exploit that power.
Right.
It's better to be Professor Xavier, but at the same time, I'm sure Professor Xavier has made more than one person, wet themselves over some imagined slight they had. Right. But anyway, but
it's interesting. We're raising some really, really deep philosophical questions, and to take just a tiny side note for a second, this weekend I went to see Logan in the movie theaters. And I'm sitting there, and when the Marvel logo first flashes on the screen, it almost felt like there was a sense of almost religious awe to the audience, where everybody was sitting there and they knew the mythology and they knew the stories. And I think comics, in a lot of ways, have become, and it's a broad leap to make, but bear with me for a second, the new church.
Well, yeah.
Not many people go to church anymore, but like people fill these theaters to hear these stories, these fables that point to what morality should look like in a good world.
Well, yeah, not for nothing, Mozz. People didn't just get hip. Most of the ancient myths people understood were stories. Right. And not for nothing, most of the Christian mythos people understood were meant to be allegory more than history. You know, people, they knew this idea of Adam and Eve, but exactly what that meant. Honestly, because people didn't concern themselves that much about what the origin of the species was until Darwin. And, honestly, if you had told people that, people are descendants of apes. Interestingly enough, there actually was a guy who had a similar theory to Darwin's. Didn't quite get natural selection down right and all this stuff, but it basically proposed this idea that yes, there were these, that one animal develops into another animal, and probably even humans are related in some way to other similar primates. And people are like, oh yeah, that's probably right. Yeah, that sounds reasonable. But people didn't get worked up over it because it didn't start to challenge any power structure. It's only when things start to challenge power structures that things start to get controversial. We now live in a world where we all know, that Gene Roddenberry created Star Trek. We know George Lucas created Star Wars. We know Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, and 1,000 other people created the Marvel Universe. And we know, who created Batman and Superman, and we know these myths. We know where these myths come from, but that doesn't take away the power of those myths.
Yes, and I think they do a better job of informing people's moral compass than what a lot of religions do today. And in all honesty, comic book nerds and Star Trek nerds are generally, and maybe this is making a broad claim, but are generally nicer people.
You can find them that are nicer, yeah. Here's what I'm going to tell you, Mozz. There is nobody who has ever come to a religion and said, you know what? Oh, I really want to hate you, but the Bible says I have to turn the other cheek. And so as much as I hate turning this other cheek, I'm going to turn it because I got to do it because that's what the Bible says. No one ever chooses a moral path because of their religion. People interpret their religion because of the moral path that is most convenient to them. I'm a guy who is very much, all peace and light and loving brotherhood stuff, and so my interpretation of Christianity comes from that perspective. Is that the right perspective of Christianity? It's right for me. But then again, I'm also going to, because I can find the explanations of it that support my theory. Likewise, you can be the guy who likes Batman because Batman is a hero in a dark world who has his rules that he never breaks, or you can be the guy who likes Batman because he's just the baddest kung fu fighter there is and kicks everybody's butt. So you can take the moral compass of Batman or Spider-Man or any superhero, or Christianity or Judaism or Islam or even Buddhism for that matter. You can find there are interpretations of all these things that say, go kick your enemies' butts because you got the right, because you got the might. And God is on our side. We have the moral obligation, whether because we are the superheroes and all you poor pitiful people are corrupt, or because, God has given us the morality and now we're going to say what you have to do. And you can do that, or you can take a different stance of, what I'll always say is that if you take a stance of humility, you're always better off. Because if you say, I really have no idea what the universe should do, I just know what I would want to be treated as. I'm going to try and treat other people like I want to be treated as.
But do you think the idea of an absolute truth, do you think that draws people of a certain bend?
Well, here's the thing, is there is an absolute truth in any perspective. There is only one. Here's the thing. There isn't a relative truth. There is only truth. And maybe I'm getting a little Newtonian on you, but objects move according to rules and laws of physics. And if we want to assume that there is any girth to spirituality, then it must also follow rules and laws similarly, we assume.
You think? Because I think once you cross the barrier from the physical world to the theoretical world that, our minds are at play on, I think the rules change the same way, planets move differently than atoms. You know what I mean? Once you cross a plane into a different, I think you're playing with a different set of rules, no?
Well, here's the thing. It's not even that planets do move differently than atoms. Atoms move in it's that what happens is that when things get into certain scales, we don't have the math for it. And it's a different thing to say that they move in ways it's a different thing to say they move in a way that we don't understand than to say they move in a way we can't understand.
No, I'm just saying that they move differently, that different rules apply to planetary motion than to, nuclear
But here's the thing. It doesn't matter. Here's the thing. Semiconductor technology is based on, and I'm gonna be mangling this because I don't even have the full knowledge. I just have the basic broad idea that I learned in college physics. So, semiconductor technology is based off of essentially a process that we don't quite understand. We don't understand exactly how the energy levels shift when energy is passed through certain semiconductors, but we do know how. We don't know how, but we do know what. We know what's going to happen when we do it, but the exact mechanism for it we don't understand. And as I always go back to, when you think about the science of fermentation, long before anyone understood what causes something to be fermented, we had developed a complete and codified science around something in which we did not know what the mechanism really was. We didn't know what we were doing. We just knew that when this was added to that and this other thing happened, we could make tasty, tasty beverages. And on many ways, long before Mendel actually came up with, his little squares to define heredity, people were already crossbreeding plants. People were already developing modernized plants for centuries, long before anyone even had a concept of what the mechanism should be for it.
Right.
And it comes down to this idea that people will always develop things before they necessarily understand the function. But eventually, when we get to what the function is, we go, oh, wow, that actually makes perfect sense.
So do you think truth in the physical world is the same as truth in the theoretical world of our consciousnesses?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't, here's the thing. I mean, and again, this could be my bias, because my bias is towards a definitive universe. You know, I am very Newtonian in my core belief system.
So even in our minds, in this ethereal place where thoughts happen and everything is chaos and unpredictable, that there is a truth in that world.
Well, yes, but you have to understand. Here's the thing: there's a truth, but it's probably a very complex truth. So, like, so if you just take something as morality, this is something humans have always known. There's this statement of, that you can take any law in the Bible and you can find 3 rabbis to tell you how it is a sin, and 3 rabbis to tell you how it's not a sin, and 3 other rabbis to sort of cut the middle ground in between. Because at the end of the day, if someone's going to shoot you, is it a sin to shoot them first? If you're in this moment of danger, what is your obligation to self-preservation? What is your obligation in your life to deal with these things? And throughout many other situations, what is a sin and what is not a sin? You can say it's relative, or you can say, no, it's not relative. It's not relative. It's just that the situation has more complexities than simply a 1-to-1 ratio, because we don't live in a 1-to-1 universe.
Right. So the way I see it is, I don't think in the idea of how we think and what we think is right and wrong, that there is an absolute truth that governs everything. I think everybody has their own individual truth, and this universe is simply a bunch of different perspectives on their truth colliding.
Well, yeah, and that's where you and I would disagree, because what my take would be is not that there's many truths, is that there is one truth, but that in any situation, to understand that truth, you have to understand 1,000 things that happened before it, and 1,000 things that'll happen after it. That is, and when I say 1,000, I really mean an infinite number.
Right.
You know, I mean that, it's like, that person made choices, so they deserve their lot. Except that person's choices were influenced by the choices their father made, and their father, and their father, and their father made. Or their mother made, and likewise, or their uncle made, or their aunt made, or their cousin made, Everything happened in a dozen different ways, in a dozen different things, to put that person here and that other person there.
Right.
And now they're all going to make their choices based on where they're at. And, the sociopath at the top of the...
So it's like inherited, in a way. You inherit a certain force towards the truth that everything came before you was pushing.
Yeah, but again, what I'm saying is there is probably one truth. It's just that our ability to deal with it is going to be manipulated by where we came from first. So let's get back to our story.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, so as I said the last episode, you have Jessica and Kilgrave both gaining these powers at about the same age. In that early teen point. In that angst, then that point in our lives where we can't make decisions because we are full of the change of life. And with Kilgrave, you have a set of powers that means that he can never be told no.
Right.
With Jessica, interestingly enough, she has a set of powers to which she can never be told no to, but to which, in order to get to that point, she has to make a much more physical action. So for example, Kilgrave's power is very passive. He says something and people do it. If he had to, like if you ever watched Scanners, if he had to, touch his temple and get a nosebleed every time he made someone do something, he might be more concerned about the power he's expending and how that's affecting people. And I think with Jessica, that's where she's at, because she just lost her family. And she's in this point where she has this power but feels completely powerless.
So she does have a price for her powers.
Well, yeah, exactly. Because in order for her to actually use her powers to force someone to do something, she actually has to force them. She actually has to deal with the blood and guts of it. She has to scare someone and intimidate someone, much in the way that she intimidated Wendy last episode. You know?
This is where I thought they were going to, when she went on her excursion, to go save these people, where I thought she was taking him was to see Wendy so he could glamour her into signing the papers.
Yeah, but no, because that would be really, really wrong and evil. What she's trying to do is she's trying to say, here is this infinite power. How can I use it for good?
Right.
And what I think is the grand revelation of this, you can't use that power for good.
Right.
Because there.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, because that's the point. Is that, and we get the taste of it when you see him manipulate the old next door neighbor. Makes her say what she really feels, and she says, I just said that. That was a lie, and I say that because it makes me feel important. It makes me feel like I have strength, And, and she said, and Kilgrave says, and didn't that feel good? And the truth of it is that to Jessica, because she has been manipulated, knows that really didn't feel good. It's like, if someone were raped and then they went and raped someone else, yes, it might have a physical feeling of goodness. But if you can identify with the person who has been manipulated or used so cruelly, you're not going to feel that was pleasurable, the way that someone who never feels that has. And that's the thing, is like for Kilgrave, this is all just a game.
Yeah, but he reacts really interesting when she accuses him of rape. He didn't like that either.
No, he doesn't. Well, does anyone? Well, when they've actively raped someone say, "Oh, no"? Bill Cosby isn't sitting there saying, "Oh, you know what? Now that you explain it to me, yeah, I see how I probably raped that girl." Yeah.
Yeah, but I just imagine that he would not be able to feel that emotion.
No. Well, that's where I get to that universal truth. He does know raping people is wrong. Right. He does understand this idea of doing these horrible things are wrong. But from his perspective he is innocent. Because, from his perspective, he is working from this idea that you get from, it's this idea in hypnosis, which is that you can never make someone under hypnosis do something they wouldn't do normally. Or something they don't truly want to do. And if you believe that, then he may say, I can't make you do anything, because anything I make you do, you want to do. And of course, what we saw earlier was people saying that, what he's effectively doing is stimulating a part of their brain that makes you want to do what he asks you to do. Makes it seem like that's the most brilliant thing to do in the world, is whatever Kilgrave tells you. And that is why that power is insidious and impossible to use for good. Because that's what we get to here, is that she takes it because, Kilgrave is like, oh, let's be superheroes and you'll be my conscience. You're going to be with me forever. You're going to be my Jiminy Cricket, and I'll do what you tell me to do. Because I want to be a good guy now. And what she comes to is this idea that that's not going to work. And she does a brilliant thing, which is she brings in the drugged Chinese food.
Right.
And even eats some herself, which is such a Princess Bride moment there. I almost imagine that it was something that she knew wasn't going to affect her, because we do know she's a hard drinker. Yes. But we've never really seen her passed out. We've always seen, I know some real hardcore drunks who are like 98 pounds, and they are people you have to carry. This is a girl we're seeing drinking fifths of bourbon, and even at her worst, she still gets up and she walks.
This has always been an interesting question in my head. Now, she's super strong, but wouldn't it follow that her body would need to be super strong to deal with the things that she does? Or
well, yeah, it is.
But she gets paper cuts. It's like
well, because she doesn't have that diamond hard skin, but she does have a healing factor. So, for example, it was only a couple episodes ago she got shot in the shoulder. We don't see any effects of that now.
Oh, that's a good point.
She does have a hypermetabolism. It's just that, if you're drinking enough straight bourbon, you will overtake it.
Right. And you probably have to maintain it with a lot.
Yeah, exactly. And we do see the bottles she's drinking. Trust me, I don't drink that much. And I can kill like a half a fifth of bourbon in a night if I really wanted to. I may not drink for 4 days after that, but I can do it when I have, not when I have to, but when I really have nothing better to do and I want to do it, I can do it. I can drink that bottle of Heaven Hill and really feel horrible afterwards. But we see this girl going through bottle after bottle after bottle.
Thanks for clearing that up.
Yeah, because, in truth, even though she can get drunk, she can't stay drunk.
Right.
And she gets sober quickly.
Horrible fate.
Or maybe a wonderful fate, because she. Well, here's the thing: it's like you have other characters like She-Hulk who literally cannot get drunk.
Oh.
And that's actually something that's been brought up before. Is that because she, because she hangs out with Patsy Walker and she hangs out with Jessica Jones, much more with Patsy Walker in the book, but and Patsy will try and drink She-Hulk under the table, and it's physically impossible. Because, as much as She-Hulk might drink, it's never going to bother her, because her body just burns it all off. Because her healing factor is at that level. But if you have that healing factor that's just a little bit less, you get to this point. And there's actually, it was actually a very interesting episode of The Incredible Hulk, or not an episode, but an issue where basically when the Hulk was back to changing at midnight, this was during the, Peter David McFarlane era, and basically the Hulk goes into a liquor store and just drinks the entire liquor store dry because he knows that once the sun comes up, he's going to turn back to Banner, and Banner is not going to be able to do anything all day. So the Hulk...
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, well, it's great because they're in this competition because it's like, I don't want you to do anything and I don't want you to do anything, so they just that antagonism between the Hulk and Banner. There's some great stuff there that sadly they never deal with in the TV show. But anyway, so we're going along now. So what happens? So plotline. Simpson breaks in. Jessica defeats him, doesn't let him take her, but she still keeps Simpson quiet. Simpson tells her that there's a bomb in the house because he wants to kill Kilgrave. She says, no, I don't want you to kill Kilgrave. They find the bomb. Plotline. We get to this point, there's out on Long Island, there's a guy who's taking his wife and daughter and someone else hostage. He's got a gun. He's going to kill them all because of whatever reason. And basically Kilgrave and Jessica go there. Kilgrave gets them in because he just says, you're going to let us in. Just does the whole Jedi mind trick on everyone. And then has the wife and daughter, and I don't know if there was another kid there or not, leave. And then Kilgrave says, now put the shotgun in your mouth. And Jessica tells him, don't, has to walk him back.
Yeah. And
Kilgrave is like, and then they have him turn himself in, but, and don't tell anyone about us. And you get this nice video where, like, Kilgrave's like, I wouldn't have even thought to not have him kill himself. That's what makes you a hero, and I want to be that too. And that's when we get to her sort of doing this soul searching when she has to go out for a bit, and we get the poor cook and maid having to stare out the window and not blink until she gets back. Wow,
that was scary.
Well, yeah.
For some reason, something like that is just it gets inside you and like, oh,
Yeah, well, that is the whole of Kilgrave, is that he is not this poor little child who is abused. He is a murderous sociopath, and that is the crux of the biscuit, and But, Jessica plays it all cool, brings in the Chinese food, says, hey, I know you like Chinese as much as Italian, and hey, look, we got the noodles. You like the noodles? She's like, oh, come on, what's the big deal? Just eat it. And she's like, takes a piece of broccoli off of his plate and eats it. Fun fact, broccoli would not have absorbed chemicals as quickly as other things because it is so fibrous. Ha ha. I don't know if it was actually a piece of broccoli she ate, but I'm going to say that now, and it makes for a fun bit there. And she knew what piece to eat. But anyway, and then all of a sudden, he starts feeling kind of woozy, and then she comes up behind him and gives him the injection, and he wakes up in the room. And then we get Simpson and the crew, and they're all like, what's going on? She stole him, da-da-da-da-da. And we actually see her get to do a flight, because she like grabs him and she jumps away, which was pretty awesome. And then we see the next door neighbor come up to Simpson with the bomb.
Yeah.
And then she detonates it, essentially blowing herself up. And that's when we leave the episode. Exciting things are coming next episode. And we will talk about that, because we got a couple more episodes to do before Iron Fist starts. And then we've got to figure out if we're gonna wrap this up or go straight into Iron Fist. But we're going to be discussing that in the next couple of hours. Mozz, any final thoughts on tonight's episode?
Oh, I thought it was a banner episode for the show. And we finally got, Jessica saying, oh, screw it, and just jabbing him herself and taking control, which I thought was really awesome. Love this episode.
Yes, absolutely. And I am very much inclined to agree. This has been a great episode, as emphasized by how much longer we've gone and how much great philosophy we talked. So yeah, this is without a doubt a banner episode. And if you would like to talk to Mozz about this episode, Mozz, how can they find you?
They can email me at mozzmanzor@gmail.com or find me on Facebook under Mozz Manzor. That's spelled MOZZMANZOOR.
And of course, you can always write to me in that old-fashioned email way the way our Mozz and Paz once did at superconnectivityblog@gmail.com. That's superconnectivityblog, all one word, at gmail.com. And of course, follow me on the Twitters at Charlie Esser. That's CharlieEsser. For the two E's in the middle for quality. Okay, cats and kittens, this has been another episode of the AKA JonesCast. Come and hang out with us again, because we really want to be your friend. Good night.